Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. In opening the meeting this morning, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting of the Statutory Planning Committee is being live streamed for the first time, and I welcome everyone that is logged on to view the meeting today. The meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing via the Commission's website or on our YouTube channel. I wish to advise observers that the Commission members may refer to technical devices such as phones and laptops throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. Opening the meeting, I also acknowledge that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I pay our respects to their elders past and present. Moving on to apologies and leave of absence, there are no apologies. Are there any application from members for leave of absence, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm requesting Monday the 16th to Friday the 27th of September, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further requests? No, thank you very much. I will advise members of the public watching today that attending in person are myself as the Chairman, Commissioner Cole, Deputy Chair of the Commission, Commissioner Brooks, Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Lakey, Member Franklin, Member Harmon, Councillor Knight, and attending via Zoom all the way from London, Member Moore. I move to item 3, disclosures of interest. Sorry, 1.3, disclosures of interest. And there are a number of disclosures of interest. I'll just run through those very briefly. I have declared a perceived impartiality interest on item 3.4, the draft Floreat precinct structure plan, consent to advertise, as I have a second cousin who owns property within the proposed structure plan area. I have seen her very occasionally over the last 30 years, and I've sought advice from our probity advisor that I do not need to leave the room. I have declared a perceived impartiality interest on item 3.6, the section 31 SAT reconsideration for lots 1401 and 1402, 50 Road, the local structure plan amendment. The report mentions that the adjoining Spires Estate local structure plan was prepared by Spatial Property Group, and my son-in-law is an employee of Spatial Property Group. I will recuse myself from partaking in the decision-making process for this item and leave the meeting. I'll also leave the meeting for the deputations on that particular item. Commissioner Adair has declared a perceived impartiality interest on item 3.6, section 31 SAT reconsideration, lots 1401 and 1402 50 Road, local structure plan amendment. Commissioner Adair has advised that she was contacted by a member of the local community regarding the procedure and timeliness for submitting a deputation request. Commissioner Adair advised that she did not engage in the conversation and advised the community member that she was unable to comment on their concerns. The Chief Planning Advisor, Kathy Bonus, has declared an impartiality interest in the fact that she is a resident of the town of Cambridge. She does not live near the Floreat Forum, but she's indicated that should the chairman or any member request that she respond to a question or otherwise provide advice on this item, then it is possible that there may be a perception that the advice is not impartial. I have declared disclosures of representation on items 3.3, 3.4 and 3.5, as I have met the proponents, their consultants, and in the case of the Floreat Forum, I've met with the council of the town of Cambridge at their request, and I have undertaken all of those meetings in my capacity as WAPC chairman. Are there any other declarations of interest, please? No, thank you very much. We move to item 1.4, declaration of due consideration. Could all members indicate they have read the agenda, please? Thank you. Item 1.5, previous minutes. 1.5.1, confirmation of the minutes of Tuesday, the 25th of June, 2024. Could I have a move and a second that we adopt those minutes, please? Moved by Commissioner Adair, seconded by Commissioner Brooks. No dissent. Are there any matters arising from those minutes, please? No, thank you very much. So we move on to item 2, deputations and presentations. And there are a number of deputations this morning. Sorry, I've got one further interest to declare. There is a common interest in item 3.3. 3.3. 3.3, sorry, yep. The land that is the subject of that application is owned by the Commission, and the Commission is the decision maker with respect to that matter. So it's an interest in common held by members of the Commission this morning. Thank you. We'll move on to item 2, the deputations and presentations, and I'll hand over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone, in person and online this morning. I welcome everyone that is present today in order to make a deputation to the Statutory Planning Committee. When we get to your item, you will be invited to join the table or promoted to panellist if you're appearing via Zoom to deliver your deputation. For those in person, it's the 3 chairs that you can see at the end of the table there. You've been advised of your allocated time in the email that you received in your approved deputation. That time will be managed by a timer which will appear on the screen and count down the allocated time. You will hear 2 alert tones, one with 30 seconds remaining and one when your time has concluded. If you have a PowerPoint presentation, we will display that on the screen and ask that you advise as you wish to advance the slides throughout your deputation. I don't plan on repeating these instructions throughout for every deputation this morning, but hopefully that information is well understood. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we move to item 2.1. It is a deputation from Norma D'Souza of the St Andrews Action Group, WA. It's regarding item 3.3, the landfill and solid waste depot, lot 821 Alexander Drive, Mirrabooka. So I invite Mr. D'Souza to join us at the table, please. Thank you.
The opportunity to have this deputation.
You'll just need to speak up if you don't mind. Sorry.
Sure. Can you hear me now? Thank you.
Thank you.
Better? Tell me when I should start. Yes.
Please start.
My name is Norma D'Souza. I represent the local community, and a submission, very comprehensive 47-page submission has been attached to your agenda. I'm going to start by asking you to walk in the shoes of thousands of residents that live in the surrounding suburb to the site, a site that is just 9.6 kilometers from the CBD. When we invested in government-released land, we built not just our homes, but we built vibrant communities, rich in culture and diversity, and supported by good schools. Today, we are learning that an industry-noxious waste site, potentially carrying asbestos, could silently creep into our backyards. And this is not acceptable. The impacts of your decision go far beyond a planning framework, project deliverables. The consequences will hit hard in the lives and the livelihoods of our people. People just like you and me. The impacts on our mental and physical health must be at the front and center of your decision-making framework. And it is health that will become the clear and obvious reason for you to reject this proposal. Talking of which, the Department of Health does not support it. The City of Stirling has rejected it. The proposal doesn't comply with the development policy framework. And now the people, in no uncertain terms, are telling you of the consequences of this waste disposal. We go one step further. We give you some viable alternatives. Why? Because waiting for 10 years is not an option. The stakes are too high, and the residents have been exposed to decades of disruption, anxiety, and toxic waste in the suburb. What we're asking of you, we understand, is clearly a monumental decision on your part. But it's incumbent on you as the government landowners to do what's right for the people and correct the wrongs of the past. We understand that the impact of your decision is huge, and it's going to require commitment, courage, leadership and bold change from this committee. In closing, I would say, if you accept the proposal, even in part, what you are basically telling us is that you accept responsibility for the impacts and the consequences of your decision on our community. And I take just a moment to engage with each one of you at this table. And I urge you to do what is obviously the right thing. Remember that it is now in your hands. Thank you, and I'll be ready for questions.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any questions, please, of Mr. Sousa? Thank you. I'll just respond very briefly to your deputation. The committee this morning is being asked to determine a land use issue regarding the land. So essentially the commission does own the land. We don't shy away from that at all. There has been a lot of press about the proposal by the operator to bury asbestos and to sort asbestos on the site. We are not dealing with that. We're dealing with the application to bury inert waste on the site to bring the land back to a level that can then be rehabilitated and used for playing fields. Essentially, the application for any license amendment or new license lies with Department of Water and Environmental Regulation, and that is going through a separate process at the moment. I do thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
We move on to item 2.2 on the same matter. I'm pleased to welcome Joshua Carmody, Craig Monaghan and Paul Savas to join us at the table. Thank you. Assuming, Joshua, you'll lead on. Josh?
I'll start, yes.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'm acting on behalf of St Andrews Grammar School and I'll be speaking against the recommendation of the DPLH to approve and in support of the city's recommendation to refuse. To be clear, we do understand that there's a historic quarry here and it needs to be filled. And our client isn't concerned about the use of clean inert fill, such as sand. The concern does relate to the fact that this approval does allow for asbestos to be transported and sorted in mixed waste loads. And acknowledging the comments the chairman has just made, if the DPLH is supportive already of restrictions on putrescible wastes, so I practice that word, putrescible wastes, it will be open to the WAPC to also support similar restrictions on asbestos as well. The DPLH in their report says this application means progress towards achieving the purpose of the reserve as a recreational playing field. The question that I have, and I've put in my written deputation, is how long are we talking about? How long will it take for those site levels to be restored? Because if this landfill activity, the landfill activity will take another 50 to 100 years, can it still be argued with that rate of progress, the activity is consistent with the intent of the reserve? Now, note that the DPLH is recommending a time-limited approval to allow a reconsideration in 10 years' time, but I guess the question that I'm asking is, why can't that process occur now? Why can't the time be spent considering the matter now? There does appear to be a prevailing assumption that the entire 21 hectare site is unusable until the quarry is filled, whereas it's not clear to me, looking at the materials, whether a large portion of the site may be capable of rehabilitation much sooner. If, and I had a quick look at Britannia Reserve, if 10 hectares of land can accommodate bike trails, car parks, 2 clubhouses and 3 playing fields on a portion of that reserve, that may suggest that on this 21 hectare site, a significant area could be developed sooner. And if that scenario was viable, then application for waste processing on the site could be prejudicial to these alternative scenarios and therefore the intent of the reserve. So in conclusion, a refusal of this application would give the community certainty at least that the WAPC is intending to investigate this matter more thoroughly. However, as I've laid out, if the WPC does see fit to approve the application in the face of community opposition, we at least request that draft condition 2 be amended to restrict putrescible waste, asbestos and other hazardous materials from being transported to, sorted or disposed of on site. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Craig Mullen, Principal of St Andrew's Grammar. You're responsible for not only planning rules and regulations, but the long-term health of our community members. The application's proximity to both school and aged care makes our most vulnerable candidates of the community at risk, and this is completely unacceptable. A separate application to Dwyer to bury 200,000 tonnes of asbestos a year. In this application, there is no inadvertent asbestos allowed on site. It makes the application of burying asbestos and the integrity of the applicant's motives in question. Refuse to see how both applications can be considered separate and unconnected applications. I'm sure the wider community and media would be very interested in this aspect, and we know they are today. We take no assurance that asbestos will not come on site. Our most vulnerable members of the community need to be protected and need to have their health and even existence protected. We know asbestos health concerns are established long after exposure and do not want to be looking back at this decision to find out down the track this decision had adverse effects on the youngest and oldest community members. Inherent potential for dangerous materials being transported with 96 trucks in and out each day is a major concern. What is our community's guarantee that no asbestos makes its way onto the site with 48 trucks coming into the area? The use of sand on site to re-establish reasonable levels should be accepted as a workable solution, and I'm hoping that gives you an alternative. And thank you for your time and permission to present this morning.
Thank you very much for both your presentations. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of the deputation? Thank you very much. Our next deputation on the same item is from Mayor Filomena Piffaretti, City of Bayswater, and Bianca Sandra.
They are over Zoom.
They're over Zoom. Okay, thank you.
Should into Zoom.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Filomena Piffaretti, and I'm the Mayor of the City of Bayswater. I'm here this morning to speak against the motion on behalf of my community. I understand the application sits within the locality of the City of Stirling. However, it borders the City of Bayswater and impacts our residents and local schools. This application requires determination under Clause 30 of the MRS. However, the land use is not consistent with the zoning of Parks and Recreation, and as such does not satisfy the MRS in this respect. I am aware that since the late 1970s, the site has been used for landfill, sand quarrying, and brick manufacturing. Yet past approvals should not dictate present decisions, especially when this application involves filling the pit with asbestos, disregards the advice of the Department of Health, and puts the health and safety of our local community and schools at risk. We should be learning from the mistakes of our past, not repeating them. In 2024, we know better than to approve an application where hundreds of residential properties and a primary school and a secondary school are all located within the legislated 500-metre buffer zone. While it is acknowledged that filling the pit is necessary for future recreational and community use of the reserve, the SPC must consider the locality's amenity with respect to this application in accordance with Clause 30 of the MRS. There are other ways of filling the pit that does not involve the burying and stockpiling of up to 100,000 tonnes of asbestos each year within 250 metres of residential properties. Such landfill activities are better suited to approved tip sites like Tamala Park and Red Hill, not in the heart of a residential area. This proximity to well-established residential areas demonstrates a clear land use conflict and is something that would only act to diminish the amenity of the surrounding residential areas. Planning is about amenity. Clause 67 tells us so. The City of Bayswater community has serious concerns with this proposal, given the lack of information provided and the fact it is not in keeping with the residential area. The information does not consider or assess the public health and amenity impacts due to the land use conflict with the surrounding residential properties. I implore the SPC to refuse this application. The applicant has a history of operating non-compliant, and the applicant has not provided all the facts of this proposal to the DPLH and the SPC to genuinely consider the amenity impacts. If the SPC chooses to approve this application against the advice of the Department of Health and against the wishes of the broader community, then I respectfully echo the request from the previous deputy and ask for a condition to be applied which prohibits any storing and disposing of asbestos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Piffaretti. Were you online when we had the first deputation and I mentioned that we're not dealing with asbestos?
I did hear those comments, Mr. Chairman, and I also heard the response from the second deputy, perhaps his name is Josh, where I would be of the view that both the application to DWER as well as to the SPC are related and should consider the impacts of the approval would actually allow asbestos.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions, please? No, thank you. Thank you very much. We move on to item 2.4 on the same issue, and we have a deputation from the City of Stirling. I'm pleased to welcome Dean Williams, Adam Stolatano and Jason Genke. Gentlemen, please take a seat at the table. Now, we do have a PowerPoint presentation. If you could just indicate when you'd like those slides moved on, please. And is it Dean, over to you?
No problem. Dean Williams, City of Stirling, Acting Service Lead Planning. Thank you for the opportunity to present at today's meeting regarding the proposed landfill solid waste depot at lot 821 Alexander Drive, Mirrabooka. Next slide, please. The City objects to the proposed development, does not support the recommendation for approval with insufficient information provided to make an informed decision, and as there is insufficient planning merit to approve the proposed development. Next slide, please. In order to enable the SPC to make a fully informed decision, further information is required, including a detailed analysis and consideration of the proposal and the impacts on the local context, including impacts of sensitive land uses, which include a school, aged care facility, and residential dwellings, some as close as 70 metres. Comments from all relevant external agencies, including but not limited to the Department of Health. The City consulted with the DOH as part of our assessment to inform our referral response, with fundamental concerns provided in response to the development, including being an unacceptable land use with residential development within the 200-metre EPA separation distance, which equates to approximately 120 dwellings. Concerns regarding toxic landfill gases being released and resulting in potential explosion and toxicity risks, with no preventive measures identified. The agenda item does not address these matters, nor is it clear whether the application was referred by the DPLH to the DOH or other affected external agencies as per statutory requirements. The agenda item also does not include any technical reports relating to asbestos, dust, noise and traffic for consideration. The City reviewed these original reports. However, updated reports have not been provided to the City for consideration, despite a number of issues being identified. The DPLH advises updated technical reports have been provided which address the City's comments. However, these have not been reviewed. Next slide, please. There is insufficient planning merit to approve the proposed development. There is no valid approval in place for a landfill and solid waste depot with the previous approval expiring December 2018. The proposal is inconsistent with orderly and proper planning, as the proposed use is inconsistent with the enhancement and purpose of the Parks and Recreation Reserve and surrounding sensitive land uses, is not incidental or compatible with the purpose of the Parks and Recreation Reserve, will prejudice the purpose of the reserve and adjoining land with a proposed approval period of 10 years. There is also overwhelming opposition to the development, with 417 submissions received during the consultation period, with 411 objections provided, which raise valid planning matters. Aside from the DPLH recommendation for support, the condition setting does not manage impacts of the life of the development or even address remediation of the site after the development ceases operation, which appears to be the only reason a recommendation of support is in the report. Should the proposal be supported, robust condition setting is required, consistent with recent approvals by the SPC and WAPC, an example being the recent wholesome and handsome concrete batching plans approved at the SPC meeting on 27 June 2024, which included robust conditions regarding the remediation of relevant sites and the clear stepping out of obligations for the landowner to decommission the use and remove the buildings and structures on site by a fixed date. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide 5. As identified, DEWA is reviewing a licence amendment to include a burial of up to 100,000 tonnes of asbestos. We note the comments provided. However, conditions should be clearly imposed, which restricts special waste being deposited on site, consistent with the condition setting at the moment, which that prevents putrescible waste, despite this not being proposed by the applicant. Final slide, sorry. In summary, the city does not support the proposal for the following reasons. Insufficient information has been provided as part of the agenda item to allow the decision maker to make an informed decision. Approval of the development is contrary to orderly and proper planning in relation to the proposed land use and recommended condition setting. Thank you for your time and for allowing the city to present at today's meeting. Should you have any questions, I have with me the Assessing Officer, Adam Silitano, Acting Coordinator Planning Approvals, Jason Jenke, Coordinator Environmental Health.
Thank you very much, Dean. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of the City of Stirling on this matter? No, thank you very much. Move to item 2.5 on the same item. We're going to be joined by David Mariana and Greg Rowe from Rowe Group. Thank you, gentlemen, if you could join us at the table. I believe you're looking off on this one.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, committee members and staff. We appreciate the opportunity to present this deputation in relation to the proposed landfill and solid waste depot on lot 821 Alexander Drive, Mirrabooka. Rowe Group acts for the proponent and lessee in relation to this matter. We wish to speak in support of the officer's recommendation to approve the application. We acknowledge the committee has heard several deputations speaking against the proposal and is in receipt of various written deputations that are also opposed to the proposal. Whilst noting these objections, this planning application seeks approval for use of land reserved under the region scheme. This requires a broad-based planning assessment with no approval required under the local planning scheme. Separately, there is an application under consideration by De Boer to amend the existing Category 63 landfill licence. It is apparent many of the concerns raised in the opposing deputations relate specifically to environmental considerations brought about by the De Boer application. We concur with the officer's assessment that the planning application is consistent with the purpose for which the land was reserved, noting the original land transfer deed between the Minister for Planning, WAPC and previous landowner, Atlas, and the current lease between the WAPC and our client. These documents recognise the historic use of the site for landfill, and that use is referred to in the leases for permitted use, and oblige the lessee to continue carrying out this activity to facilitate the future use of the site for recreation and supports playing fields in particular. The solid waste depot is complementary to the existing use, providing for sorting and separation of materials for reuse and recycling, so these can be diverted from landfill. We also agree with the officer's report that the environmental and amenity concerns raised in the opposing deputations are matters to be considered by De Boer as part of its assessment of the application to amend the landfill licence. These concerns should not deter the committee's favourable consideration of this land use planning proposal. We say these matters should be considered as part of the assessment of a separate application, which has been made under separate environmental legislation. Therefore, we respectfully request the committee endorse the officer's recommendation and approve the application, subject to the conditions as set out in the officer's report. We would be concerned and opposed to the inclusion of an additional condition that prohibits the bearing of asbestos materials, as that is a matter for the licence application to deal with before doer. Thank you for considering the deputation. We're available to respond to questions should they arise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the deputation. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of David? Thank you, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your deputations, all of you. I have a question in relation to the issue of the time to fill the, based on the receipt of Class 1 fill. We have heard a question about the fact that there's an understanding that that does need to be filled in terms of returning the topography to usable state. But a question on if you are to continue to receive Class 1 fill, what is the timeline that you believe will be necessary to fill?
Chairman, I might be better equipped to address Commissioner Cole's question. I was involved in the negotiations with the West Australian Planning Commission to enter into the current lease. The current lease is for 25 years. Current lease has extensions as well at the applicant's election and the agreement of the Commission. The notion of how long it might take to fill has not been finally determined because it is very much dependent on the amount of fill that the applicant is allowed to bring to site. Notwithstanding the comments that have been raised about asbestos as a possible component of that fill, if asbestos is excluded, the fill program will take significantly longer because it will rely on other materials to fill, which are all subject of the landfill levy. Asbestos is exempt from the landfill levy. So at the moment, we're optimistic that the 25 years period will be sufficient, but there is a significant amount of fill needed, hundreds of thousands of cubic metres. The site is 40 metres deep, and we do know that every part of the 25 years may well be needed. And the componentry of the material is very important as the amount of material we can put into the excavated area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. But at the moment, you can confirm that the proposal sitting with the committee this morning is for inert waste.
Yes, that's certainly the case, Chairman. I might add, there's been an intimation or a suggestion in some of the deputations and submissions that we are asking the committee on behalf of the Commission to commence landfill. The application has been characterised as commencement of landfill. That's not the case. There has been landfill on this site since 1978. It has continued under valid approvals from both the relevant environmental authority and the relevant planning authority. And the burying of putrescible waste discontinued quite a long time ago, decades ago. We are proposing to continue to place inert waste. The change we are asking, and it is really the thrust of the application, is to be able to sort that material on site and bury inert waste that has no future use, take away for other purposes salvageable inert waste, and make some physical changes to the site, including creation of some new earth bunds on the north side. But we are not seeking from the committee planning approval to bury inert waste. We're already in that position with valid environmental approvals and valid planning approvals. But your question, Chair, we are only burying inert waste.
Thank you very much.
Chair, could I ask a follow-up
By all
question?
means, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you. Just having had some involvement in Mindarie Regional Council, I do understand sometimes sourcing waste can be problematic. I just wondered whether you have secure sources of inert waste, and in terms of the possibility of waste sorting, what the sources of waste might be in terms of the sorts of waste that would potentially be brought to site under different circumstances.
Thank you, Chairman, to Commissioner Cole. Client, the applicant, who is the current leaseholder of the land, is arguably the largest demolition contractor in Western Australia. The material will be brought from demolition sites of all scales and sizes around the metropolitan area, including residential and commercial, and some significant projects outside of the Perth metropolitan area. At the moment, the current applicant, the operator, is regarded as perhaps the largest demolition contractor of commercial buildings, including government assets such as Subiaco Oval, Perth Children's Hospital, former. So the availability is coming from the very best sort in terms of guaranteed volume and longevity. Chairman, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Adair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I just have a question in relation to a comment that you made in your deputation that it's been an ongoing activity on site for many, many years. And in the report, it states that the landfill operations was to cease in the last approval by December 2018. Was there a consequent approval beyond that, or has activity continued beyond that?
Chairman, if I may. Thank you,
Mr.
for your
Rowe.
question. We would need to say in reply that we have expressed to the department that we don't agree with that contention, that the time-limited approval that the report refers to did not relate to the landfill operation. And we presented both to DWER and the Department of Planning the case that we did not need planning approval for landfill and that the 2018 contention of an expiry was incorrect. We have not been able to completely satisfy the department officers that that is indeed the case, but on our inspection of the earlier reports that did have a time-limited approval, it included quite a number of activities that were then extant on the site, but not the landfill. So our contention is that that is an ill-informed conclusion. However, in our submission, we took the view that we maintain that position, but to put this question entirely beyond doubt, we included in this application. To be clear, we believe that we have an ongoing and valid planning approval, and the landfill operation have continued in accordance with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Any further questions, please?
Richard, just one further question. Just picking up on some of the City of Stirling's queries this morning around conditions of approval and the question of remediation. I'd welcome your commentary on that.
The remediation that's required is already the subject of documents that have been submitted and approved by the WAPC as part of the lease. So the history was an agreement by way of deed to transfer the land to the WAPC and then continue to lease it back from the WAPC for the required landfill. Part of that deed included a lease, and the lease requires rehabilitation programs and plans to be prepared and approved. Part of entering into the first lease, the lease last year, which was a transfer of the lease from the previous owner to the current proponent, those preliminary plans have been prepared. So we have no difficulty with the remediation plans that have been put forward so far, and we understand that if we had to change those, or if we're asked to change them, they need to be dealt with both under the lease and perhaps likely under the planning approval, but certainly under the lease. So that doesn't present us with any difficulties.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? No, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for answering questions. We now move to item 2.6, and we'll have our first deputation on the draft Floreat precinct structure plan, consent to advertise, which is item 3.4 on the agenda. And I'm pleased to welcome Melanie Foley, Floreat First Community Action Group, to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you Thank you very much, and good morning. The department says that you have the power to make the decision to advertise the proponent's plan today, but to clarify, a power does not be a requirement for you to act. The Dean provisions confer on you a discretion whether to advertise, using the word may in 18.4.
Today, I will discuss two themes. First, I'll outline multiple failures in the proponent's planning process that I believe warrants your consideration to exercise discretion, not to advertise. And second, I'll outline the community-led plan that's being prepared, and it's this second plan we believe should be advertised. The first failure by the proponent is a failure in planning process relating to community engagement. The precinct design guidelines under state policy stipulate community engagement should always be proportionate to the scale of the precinct and the potential level of community impact. For a complex, high impact plan such as this, 19 different engagement techniques are listed for use. The proponent used 3 techniques once 2 years ago. The only engagement with the whole community was one online survey in 2022. It asked people what they like and what they'd change about the shopping centre. The proponent now plans to not redevelop the shopping centre, so the consultation doesn't reflect the change proposal before you. If the community had been consulted consistent with state policy, we would have seen pressure for amendments and the plan would be in much more serviceable form. This is a fundamental failure in planning process. It undermines its efficiency. The second failure is the proponent's plan is so inconsistent with the planning framework, it's not ready for advertising. The main premise for the proponent's plan is that long-term leases make redevelopment of the shopping centre too difficult. Preparing a plan that sacrifices sustainable long-term planning outcomes for the sake of protecting revenue streams is not orderly and proper. Not redeveloping the shopping centre forces development to the edges of the site to a height of 20 stories. This height is well in excess of State Policy 4.2, which stipulates mid-rise apartments for Floreat as a district centre. The residential design codes define mid-rise as 6 stories. Pushing heights to 20 stories contradicts state policy hierarchy, as only a district centre with a train station should have high-rise. The closest train station is 4 kilometres away. It also contradicts the LPS recommendation of 8 stories above the shopping centre. The proposal suggests 0. So in summary, the protection of commercial leases when preparing a plan is not a relevant planning consideration in the frameworks that we have reviewed. And secondly, the Commission defines state planning policies as providing the highest level of planning policy and control. These controls have been breached in the preparation of this plan, and I request the committee consider enforcing those controls today by exercising your discretion. The second theme today is the strong community interest in the redevelopment of the Floreat Centre and the strong support for the town's plan. Earlier this year, hundreds of residents attended a special electors meeting calling to appoint an independent consultant to expedite the town's plan. The town conducted 4 visioning workshops earlier this year. Hundreds of residents attended, and the outcomes are being used to inform the town's plan. 2 weeks ago, 300 residents attended a community town hall and continued to voice their strong objection to the proponent's plan. The proponent declined to take part in that community meeting. This significant ongoing attendance reflects the community's strong intent for Floreat and support of mid-rise density of around 8 stories, where it constitutes good urban form, delivers sustainable and positive outcomes for the community. I'm one of the community members elected to the town's PSP working group, working collaboratively with councillors, the mayor and consultants GHD. Early indications show that meeting mid-rise apartment design for a district centre can easily be achieved in Floreat, consistent with state policy and the LPS. Phasing the upgrade of the retail centre is contemplated to minimise business disruption. A more efficient use of planning resource will be to consider the town's policy-aligned plan, which is likely to be passed with strong community support and ready within months. Compared to the challenging process that lies ahead for the proponent's plan that's inconsistent with your policies, it's devoid of community support and it will be challenged every step of the way. It's also inconsistent with the foundational principles of the Perth Appeals strategy and the Commission's own objectives. And I'll finish with this. The former Commission Chair wrote in the Perth Appeals strategy that plans are only as good as the will to implement their vision on behalf of communities. And the Commission's current strategic mission is to ensure planning decisions for the long-term benefit of the community. The proponent's plan neither provides for the long-term benefit of the community nor demonstrates any to implement the community's vision. I conclude by reiterating my request, please exercise your discretion today not to advertise the proponent's plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Before I ask for questions, I'll just point out that the committee this morning is being asked to determine whether or not it is prepared to consent to advertise a properly made structure plan. We're not actually debating the content of the structure plan. It is whether or not under the regulations it is considered to be properly constructed. So that's where we have to turn our minds today. So thank you very much for your deputation. Members, are there any questions, please, of Melanie? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move to item 2.7 on the same matter, and I'm pleased to welcome Christy Gannon, Coast Ward Ratepayers Association, to join us. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you. My name is Christy Gannon and I'm speaking on behalf of the Coast Ward Ratepayers Association, which was established in June 1980. We have represented the town's Coast Ward community on select issues, including supporting the preparation of the local planning strategy, which was endorsed by the WAPC on 30th of April 2021. As such, we support development in accordance with the LPS. We are opposed to the advertising of the draft PSP prepared by April, as I will outline. Next slide, please. The design review panel was created by the town and is available for proponents to obtain design feedback on proposed developments on their own land. It has no quasi-judicial power, legal authority, or delegation of power, and does not report to council. April prepared a master plan design concept for its own site, which it lodged with the town staff for submission to the design review panel in February 2021. This master plan concept did not propose to plan the area between Floreat Avenue and Hornsey Road, known as the transition precinct. This master plan outlined a stage rebuild of the shopping centre and received feedback from the panel on design matters only. It did not seek to affect statutory planning and land zoning in the Floreat District Centre. This master plan concept was not a draft precinct structure plan and it was never put to the town's council. Therefore, the statement in the second paragraph of the summary of the SPC agenda report that the draft PSP has been under preparation for several years and predates the town's local planning strategy is factually incorrect. Slide 3, please. This timeline was taken directly from April's plan and clearly shows an illustration from the design review panel in February 2021 at the left, right there, without density in the transition precinct up to Hornsey Road. So with the red arrow. Additionally, the community survey conducted in 2022 still centred around the shopping centre itself. Next slide, please. The principles of orderly and proper planning require the Commission follow its own legislation. The draft April PSP was not accepted by the local government on the 7th of May before any deemed acceptance was effective under Regulation 17(2)(b) of the deemed provisions. April was notified of this decision on 8th of May. It's our understanding that the Statutory Planning Commission does not have the power to advertise the draft April PSP under Clause 18(4) of Schedule 2, Part 4 of the deemed provisions, as the local government did not accept the application for the draft structure plan to be assessed. Any decision by the SPC to advertise the draft PSP is therefore ultra vires. Next slide, please. In conclusion, the CWRA encouraged our community to have reliance and trust in the LPS and the strategic planning process, and we are now concerned and disappointed that our community's plan can be disregarded by the WAPC. We also note that the applicant makes to stand a substantial windfall gain from any PSP. There are a lot of challenges with this unique site. However, there's an opportunity to have a far better lasting outcome. We therefore ask the committee to use your discretion and not authorise advertising of the draft April plan.
Thank you very much, Christy. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of the deputation? No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We move to item 2.8, a deputation on the same matter. And I'm pleased to welcome Deputy Mayor Ben Mays, Councillor Jane Cutler, and Luke's with you. Sorry, is Luke Gibson with you? Okay. So councillors Mays and Cutler. And councillor Mays, I believe you're going to lead off. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. On the 7th of May 2024, the Town of Cambridge Council made a decision under clause 17, subparagraph 2 of the deemed provisions to not accept the precinct structure plan submitted by Apple Group and gave written notice to the applicant of its decision. That decision was subsequently reaffirmed by Council on the 4th of June 2024. The Council made its decision for a number of reasons. In early November 2023, the newly elected council was advised that the applicant had presented their Floreat Activity Centre plan to the Mayor and the town's executive team, and that the plan was, in the Mayor's words, confronting. The council then resolved in late November of 2023 to request that the applicant present its PSP to a public forum convened by the town, so that genuine community consultation could occur prior to it being formally submitted. The applicant declined that request. Following growing public concern, the council resolved in December of 2023 to instead prepare its own PSP for the Floreat Activity Centre. Again, this was before the applicant had formally submitted their plan. The council decided to prepare its own plan because it believed in doing so it would best enable the interests of all stakeholders, including landowners and the local community, to be fully and independently taken into account. When the council was finally afforded the opportunity to view the applicant's plan, it was found that it was not consistent with the outcomes expected of the town's local planning strategy, a strategy that had only been endorsed by the WAPC in April of 2021. The town of Cambridge is fully committed to its infill targets and has completed a significant body of work over many years to get to where we are today. In its appeal to the Commission, the applicant asserts that the council has failed to progress its request. That is incorrect. It ignores council's decision to not accept the plan. Council's decision has not been challenged by the applicant. I cannot emphasise this enough. The impact of a structure plan for the Floreat Activity Centre will last for generations. Advertising the applicant's plan would cause unnecessary alarm and anxiety within the community. It would also disrupt the town's efficient planning efforts and erode community trust in the planning system. The council is committed to the established process and timeline for the town's own PSP, which involves extensive consultation with the local community. This will ensure a coherent, inclusive and strategically aligned plan is developed for the Floreat Activity Centre, with a draft to be advertised for public comment later this year. The town's plan will be far more aligned with the adopted local planning strategy. So I implore you to please, whether you agree or not that the applicant's plan is properly constructed, exercise your discretion today and vote against the department's recommendation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, councillor. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of councillor Mays? No, thank you very much. On the same matter, we move to item 2.9. We're going to be joined by Adrian Cagnana from Hatch and Peter Hughes and Euston Gabriel from Apple Development. Anyone please join us at the table. Adrian, you have a PowerPoint presentation that's coming up.
Yes, we do.
So you could just indicate when you'd like the slide vote on, please. Thank you.
Good morning and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the officer's recommendation to initiate advertising of the draft Floreat PSP. I'm here with and on behalf of Apple Property, the owners and managers of the Floreat Forum, being the primary landowner of the Floreat precinct, who have invested significantly in the draft precinct structure plan. The draft PSP is in direct alignment with a very strong planning framework, including the endorsed Town of Cambridge local planning strategy prepared to achieve the dwelling targets of Perth and Peel at 3.5 million. The strategy directed population and dwelling growth to 3 major activity centres, of which Floreat is one, and importantly identified the need for a precinct structure plan to be prepared, the boundary of that precinct structure plan, as well as a dwelling and floor space targets to be achieved within the plan. Based on this endorsed brief, April, at the request of the then Mayor and key councillors, began a very thorough 3-year process to prepare the plan. The process has included key meetings with the town's administration and Department of Planning staff, a range of community consultation initiatives, and independent input by the Town of Cambridge's Design Review Panel on 3 separate occasions. Beyond this process, further meetings have been requested with the town's administration, both pre and post lodgement, but unfortunately, due to the operation of the town's local planning policy number 33, developer contact with staff, those meetings have been declined. Slide, please. As mentioned, community and stakeholder engagement has been undertaken to inform the draft plan, which included workshops with existing retailers and landowners within the activity centre frame, and a wider community survey which received over 500 responses. And just to clarify, the survey was aligned to the 6 design principles of SPP 7.2, precinct structure planning guidelines, and the feedback received directly informed and objectives of each of those 6 design principles. Next slide, please. The concept design supporting the draft PSP has also been presented to the town's design review panel on 3 occasions. The 3rd DRP in principle support was achieved and endorsed. That design review panel is chaired by the town's planning administration, and it was agreed to progress to the PSP at this point, or the design concept had progressed to a point which enabled a PSP to be prepared. Next slide, please. Whilst not the item for this discussion today, the process has culminated in a design that we see significant merit in and does contain significant public benefit, including new public spaces, new thoroughfares through the site, reconfigured and upgraded retail spaces, as well as 10% deep soil for all major development sites, whilst achieving the dwelling infill and commercial floor space targets and dealing with the complexity of an operating retail asset on the site. Slide, please. On lodgement of the PSP in February this year, we have continued this very thorough planning process, including responding to requests for additional information with the town's council, an assessment and recommendation from the town's administration that the PSP is in a manner and form suitable for advertising, and a deemed acceptance of that plan for advertising. Along this process, however, we have been confronted by a range of contradictory council decisions, which we believe are not in line with fair and proper planning, including a decision to prepare a town-led PSP in December last year against the advice of the administration and the Department of Planning, as well as a decision to not accept the draft PSP for advertising, which council's own independent legal advice confirmed is not a valid decision provided for by the regulations and has no effect. These decisions are clearly of significant concern for us and the very type of decisions that we believe the regulations and planning reforms need to avoid. Next slide, please. So in summary, we'd like to reiterate the thorough planning process that we have been through and invested in by our client over a very long period of time in full knowledge of the town and council through meetings, formal written correspondence and design review panel feedback. And would therefore like to confirm our support for the officer's recommendation to initiate advertising, request that this advertising occur as soon as possible, particularly given the PSP and all supporting appendices have been in the public arena since the 20th of May council agenda, and reaffirm our own commitment to work collaboratively with stakeholders to progress this strategic and important PSP for both the town and the broader city.
Thank you, Adrian. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of Adrian following the deputation? Thank you, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you for the deputation, Adrian. Just in relation to the proposed advertising by the DPLH, I wondered whether the proponent or yourselves will be undertaking any additional consultation with community during that period if that is approved.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that we would consider doing. It's been a very dynamic kind of last few months, including new community groups and steering committees that have been advised. So we haven't turned our attention exactly to what that process may look like. But certainly I think given the current circumstances, that would be something that potentially April would be looking to invest in through the advertising process.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for the presentation. Our next deputation is over Zoom. So we move to item 2.10. It's on the proposed amendment number 1 to the North Ellenbrook West District Structure Plan, which is before the committee this morning for final determination. It's item 3.5 on the agenda. And we're going to welcome Damien Shepherd and Tom Barry from Stockland, Kasia Betka from CDP Town Planning and Design, and John Helene, Pentium Water. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and SPC members. So just in summary, we're supportive of the content and recommendation of what we viewed as a really well-written report, and we make this deputation to emphasise a couple of key points. The planning case for the inclusion of lot 5892 as urban land under the DSP is clearly well-grounded and compelling, creating an ideal opportunity for a sequential and logical extension of the proposed urban area for North Ellenbrook. Vegetation across the vast majority of the land, being 120 hectares within the mining tenement, will be cleared as part of the sand resource extraction process, which operates under all required environmental and planning approvals. The land will be subject to statutory processes being MRS and TPS amendments, as well as strategic local structure planning processes. All issues, including those associated with the environmental values of the land, will be assessed in detail by all planning environmental government agencies as part of those processes. The next layer of spatial planning will respond to all outcomes of these processes as required. It's in the interest of the key stakeholders, being the landowners, the sand mine operator, the developer, and also in the interest of the state's economic development for the sand resource to be fully exhausted. This is the crux of SPP 2.4, basic raw materials, and was clearly identified in a submission made by DMERS on this proposal. It's our view that the most critical strategic question at this stage is what is the highest and best use of the land post sand mining, given everything that we now know, which is that the majority of the site will be cleared of vegetation to facilitate the approved sand mining operations. There's a current housing supply shortage in Perth, particularly in the northeast corridor, with a number of major projects now concluding. The land immediately to the north and northeast has been strategically endorsed by government via district structure planning for urban development, and the significant infrastructure and investment which has occurred in the area to date and is further required to unlock housing in terms of freeway interchanges and the like. Given this, we believe that the logical and strategic conclusion is for the land to be developed for urban purposes. In regard to implementation and staging of urban development, it's always been acknowledged that sequential land use at this site will need to occur in response to the progression of sand mining, and we're committed to continuing to address the details of this as planning progresses through the required layers. Thank you for your time and welcome any questions to myself or the consultant team here with me.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Committee members, are there any questions, please, following the deputation? No, there are no questions, so thank you very much for that. You're more than welcome to continue to observe the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks all. Thank you.
Now, I am recusing myself from the next three deputations.
Thank you, Chair.
And I'll hand over to the Deputy Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now moving to consider deputations from item 3.6, which is the section 31 stat reconsideration for lots 1401 and 1402 50 Road local structure plan amendment. And we have deputation 211. So could you please come to the table? Is from Rebecca Thompson of Road Group, Chris Kennedy from Royal, Scott Lambie from Stantec, and Tony Shrapnel from Shrapnel Urban Planning. Rebecca, will you be leading the deputation?
I will, thank you.
Just to note that you have requested 4 minutes and that has been granted.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We're speaking in favour of the proposed amended structure plan. The proposal is seeking to increase the area allocated to commercial within the structure plan to provide for a second supermarket and supplementary specialty uses within the Beldivis North Neighbourhood Centre. Contrary to what will be stated by the next deputation, there is precedence for neighbourhood centres hosting 2 supermarkets, which is indeed recognised in the city's commercial strategy. An amendment to the structure plan was previously approved by WAPC in 2021, subject to modifications. These modifications included a reduction in the centre footprint and retail floor space allocation, which ultimately would not allow for a second supermarket. This was appealed by the applicant and that process has been ongoing since that time.
Through the reconsideration process, we work very closely with the department to confirm the floor space allocations for the site, as well as work through the various traffic and design considerations. This has ultimately led to a revised amended structure plan being lodged with the department, which has now been supported in the officer's report. Unfortunately, the city's initial assessment of the proposal, which was the basis for the previous WAPC decision, was based on incorrect floor space assumptions. This has now been resolved, which is outlined in the officer's report. The technical reporting that's been undertaken on behalf of both the proponent and also independently by the department conclude that a second supermarket can in fact be supported at the centre, and the city's centre strategy also supports a second supermarket. We acknowledge, however, the ultimate floor space allocation for the centre is based on a staged delivery of the centre. So based on that work that's been undertaken, the department officers have recommended approval for the floor space with a deferred delivery until 2032. We understand the city is also supportive of that timeframe. We agree to this recommendation. However, we are asking for an additional statement be added to that modification, which provides for an earlier commencement date where justification is provided by a retail assessment that's been prepared in accordance with the requirements of SPP 4.2. The delivery of the centre as soon as appropriate will provide for the needs of the community in what's recognised as a very rapidly growing residential area. Noting also the proposal will ensure integration with the balance of the centre to the south through the continuation of Yellowstone Road as a main street outcome. The proponent is supportive of all other modifications with just that one requested change. So in summary, the floor space allocation has now been resolved with all parties recognising a second supermarket can be supported. Traffic management matters have been resolved through the revised reporting and proposed modifications, and detailed centre design matters can be addressed through the subsequent planning processes. I'm also going to throw over now to Tony quickly to respond to the comments which are going to be made in the next deputation.
Thank you. I only received the need to do this first right morning. But to quickly answer it, the first thing I'd say it's the first time for everything. One of the comments made was that there should be two supermarkets in a neighbourhood centre. Well, I remember when Alexander Heights was first constructed, as a neighbourhood centre, it had two supermarkets in it. There's another one down in Southern River that I remember the name of. But the point being that there's no need, even though there's two supermarkets planned, there's no need for the equivalent of two lots of specialty stores. That can remain as normal. The fact that macro plans work on the potential for the 11,000 square metre supermarket using its methods and the same result coming out of my methods, I think is a fairly good indication of the solidity of the concept of 11,000 square metre supermarkets, two supermarkets in a 11,000 square metre neighbourhood centre. I think that's a clear indication of it, and not forgetting the time frame. So it's not as though it's all going to happen at once. And furthermore, the population of Baldivis and Baldivis North is over 30,000. That's what is going to be planned to be. So therefore, I mean, most neighbourhood centres are in neighbourhoods of between 3,500 to 5,000 or even 6,000 population.
Can I just point out you are 1 minute 20 over time now, so if you could just make some concluding comments, it would be appreciated, just to be fair to all deputies.
Thank you.
Do you want to make a last comment? That's all. I think that has been covered in the report, so the members are aware of that. So thank you very much for your deputation. Members, any questions of the deputies? No? Thank you very much. On the same item then, we will move to Tamara Vikran from Niche Planning.
should call item 2.12 is one by Zoom from the City of Rockingham, Jake Spiteri.
Spiteri. Jake Spiteri is joining us by Zoom, and
it appeared he thought. Good morning, Jake. We can see you now. Can you hear us?
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you.
Morning, Jake. Welcome to the SPC meeting. We understand that you're here to provide a deputation on item 3.6, and I'd welcome you to start your deputation.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present in relation to the structure plan amendment for lot 1401 and 1402 50 Road, formerly known as lot 311. The structure plan amendment process and reconsideration request has been ongoing since 2021, as mentioned. The city is still concerned that a number of the issues have not been resolved as part of the Section 31 request and the further information provided. The city wishes to raise a number of the items for the Commission's consideration, majority of which have been covered through the SPC report. The TIA is still subject to a number of concerns. The city has concerns regarding the validity of the traffic assessment and as well as the intersection analysis. A fundamental concern in relation to the intersection analysis for Nair Drive and 50 Road and Nair Drive and Amazon Drive. The analysis suggests that both traffic signal and roundabout treatments will not function satisfactorily at Nair Drive and 50 Road, operating at a level of service F and degree of saturation exceeding 0.9 for traffic signal and 0.85 for roundabout. Level of service is identified by Ausroads as the qualitative classification of performance measures representing quality of service. There are 6 levels of service, level of service F being the lowest. The degree of saturation of an intersection approach ranges from 0 for very low traffic flows and 1 for saturated flow of capacity. If the structure plan is approved in its current form with a level of service F, intersection and degree of saturation exceeding 0.9 for traffic signal and 0.85 for a roundabout, WPC are willing to support an intersection that will force breakdown flow and is considered unsatisfactory. The city does not support the amendment on this basis. The demand, as mentioned in the report, suggests that a level of service is generated by regional traffic. The assessment and assumption is questioned as the approved structure plan supporting the TIA for lot 311 without the introduction of the secondary commercial centre and changes to the structure plan performs at a level of service D.
Jake,
level of service D.
Excuse me, Jake.
Yes.
Sorry, just breaking up a little bit there. I wondered if you might just go back a couple of sentences because we lost a little bit of what you were saying.
No worries. If the structure plan is approved in its current form with a level of service F, intersections and degree of saturation exceeding 0.9 for traffic signal and 0.85 for a roundabout, WPC willing to support an intersection which will force breakdown of flow of traffic and is considered unsatisfactory. The city does not support the amendment on this basis. The demand, as mentioned in the report, suggests level of service is generated by regional traffic. The assessment and assumption is questioned and the approved structure plan is supporting TIA for lot 311 and secondary centre commercial changes to the structure plan level of service D. Level of service D is considered satisfactory. If the structure plan is supported, the ultimate design for Nair Drive and 50 Road intersection needs to be considered. This is outlined to refined at the subdivision and development stage and in consultation with the city and applicant. The city recommends the traffic signal be preferred due to the context of the location of the Baldivis Primary School. The city's local commercial activity centre strategy expansion for the Baldivis Neighbourhood Centre to an overall commercial floor space of 8,655 square metres and 9,441 square metres, 2036 and 2041 respectively. The recommendation as outlined by the Commission and SPC report is supported by the city, and the staged gate approach to the development of the progressive increase to the commercial floor space in Baldivis North Neighbourhood Centre is consistent with the LCACs. The staging requirements allow certainty to centres will perform to their full potential without adversely impacting the established Spire Centre operation. The most recent data and population forecast being released compared with the submitted retail assessment suggests that 2 supermarkets developed prior to 2032 will significantly impact the shopping centres in the area. The city does not support expansion of the secondary centre prior to 2032 on this basis. To conclude, the
Jake,
city
just
outlines.
to conclude.
Yep.
Keep
To
going.
conclude, the city outlines the intersection treatment of 50 Road and Nairn Drive as a fundamental flaw to the proposed amendment. The city does not support the conclusion regarding a preferred intersection treatment in its current state. We appreciate the opportunity and present and look forward to the outcomes decision by the WAPC. Thank you, and I would like to answer any questions if they are.
Thank you very much, Jake. You did score an extra minute and a half there, but I think that was fair given the earlier deputation. I'll just pass over to members now to see if there are any questions. There are no questions, but thank you very much for your deputation, Jake.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, the third deputation on this item, we are being joined in person by Tamara Wickren from Niche Planning Studio and Greg Davis from Tactics 4, if you'd like to join us at the table. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us present our objection to the proposed structure plan in 50 Road. The majority of our objection to the structure plan relies on the retail and economic assessment of the proposal. And we're going to focus on that. There is some questions about, I suppose, the integration with the adjoining Spires structure plan, which is what we represent the owners on. And if we have time, I will also comment on those, but I'll hand to Greg to cover the retail and economic.
Thank you very much. I accept that there might be a first time for everything, but I would imagine that first time should be under a holistically designed and planned activity centre rather than being an add-on or an adjunct to something that's already been developed. So the implications for policy of this proposal is that it doubles the size of a neighbourhood centre to 11,000 square metres. Deep End Services in previous submissions confirm out of 140 neighbourhood and local centres in Perth, not one has two full-line supermarkets. That's a Coles and a Woolworths combined, notwithstanding my learner colleague. No neighbourhood centre in Perth has two full-line supermarkets. This is more associated with district centres. We believe that this proposal elevates the neighbourhood centre to more of a district centre status, and that is effectively changing the hierarchy of the centre overall. Next slide. Yeah, no, sorry, that slide's fine. We believe that it sets a dangerous precedent for all neighbourhood centres in the network, leads to a loss of residential catchment and fails the development sector that have invested considerably and according to robust and orderly planning within the Baldivis sector. Thank you. The economic impacts analysis confirms that there's no demand for additional supermarket floor space. We don't see that. We see 10 to 15% impact on annual sales, $168 million per annum in available supermarket spending by 2031-32 will not support 5.5 supermarkets. I think it's important to remember this is not just adding a new supermarket. We've got Spudshed, we've got Miller's Landing up the road, but more importantly, we're going to rely, this proposal would rely on spending and visitation from South Baldivis because it will become a viable alternative to go past the Baldivis town centre in order to shop at a convenient location. Next slide. So likely economic impacts. Coles will be developed at the centre adjacent to Baldivis North. Baldivis North is elevated to a district centre status, at least from a customer perspective. Therefore, the centre will start drawing customers, as I said, from South Baldivis. They'll require these additional sales to remain active and survive. And the planning process will have failed the community. From a design perspective, neighbourhood centres don't generally involve two full-line supermarkets. And if they do, they rely on a synergy and a connectivity between them to justify or support the specialty shops between them. That can't happen here under the current plan because they're two different centres. So whilst two supermarkets, if it is supported with two supermarkets, it doesn't necessarily equate to two pharmacies, two butchers, two bakers, because there's just not enough dollars associated with those sorts of centres. And I've gone over.
Can I have 20 seconds just to cover off on this last slide?
You're sort of running over here, but if you
just quickly,
we'll need to finish in 20 seconds.
So it promotes the elongation of the neighbourhood centre all the way up the regional road, which is not supported by LN. It hasn't adequately address the interface with our structure plan, putting a POS backing onto R40 with no integration, also a laneway at the back of front-loaded R25. We could have retaining walls. They're all being designed to suit that now. So that's the last 3 comments.
Thank you. That was very well in the 20 seconds. Members, are there any questions? No. Thank you for providing your powerful information in advance. I received that in advance of the meeting. So thank you very much. Now the chairman.
Thank you very much. We move to item 2.14 on the Town of Cambridge Local Planning Scheme number 1, amendment number 43, before us for approval to advertise. And I welcome Jessica Sears from the Cambridge Tree Canopy Advocates to the table. Thank you, Jessica.
Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity.
We'll advance the slides when you're ready.
Great, thanks. I'm Jessica Sears. I'm a managing director at Sear Partners Management Consulting Firm, but today I'm here as a resident of the Town of Cambridge to urgently request that the WAPC approve that we put our local planning amendment for advertising. The Cambridge Tree Canopy Advocates is part of the West Australian Tree Canopy Advocate Group in Cambridge. We represent around 400 members from our town, but we're part of a group of West Australians that represent 25,000 people across 25 local government areas in Western Australia. Our mission is to work with the likes of yourselves at WAPC to drive the urgent regulatory change that's needed to stop our tree canopy crisis here in Perth, here in WA. Next slide, please. I think for everybody who hasn't been living under an air conditioner rather than a rock, I will say you're surely aware of the media, the press interest, the canopy crisis that we're facing right here in WA. In Perth, we have the lowest canopy cover of any capital city at 16%. We are also the only capital city with no protections for trees on private property. In Town of Cambridge, which is why I'm here to talk to you today, our canopy cover is declining rapidly. In the planning period from our urban forest strategy, we have lost 2% of our canopy cover. To go to an even more alarming number that's very pertinent to the decisions that the WAPC will be making today and into future, on developed lots, our canopy cover has dropped down to a shocking 5% from 13% in 2009. So I think the numbers speak for themselves in terms of crisis that we're facing. 80% of the losses that we're facing in Town of Cambridge are from trees on private land. So for the regulatory experts in the room, and there are many, including the chairman, we understand that when we start with an education approach on a risk basis, you do need to start moving into regulation as you get to that crisis point. We are beyond guidelines. We are beyond urban greening strategies here. We are really requiring regulation to stop this issue that we're facing. From a local perspective, this is not an argument about housing crisis versus trees. We are talking about 1,000 square metre blocks which have been razed to the ground, that have 400 tulip trees being knocked down, 50-year-old gum trees. We're not talking about a few pairs that were bought at Bunnings 2 years ago. We're talking about really significant endangered habitat. I also urge you that the crisis we're facing is causing significant community disputes and upset. We're talking about neighbours fighting in the street. We're talking about people shouting at each other at the Christmas party. We need regulation. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip through this because I'll run out of time, but particularly Commissioner Cole, your background in local government, your extensive, impressive record, the council has invested significant time and money in passing a motion, in drafting a scheme amendment, in drafting the complementary planning policies to support the development application process, and a third motion that was put forward and approved at the AGM in just February this year. The next step is to advertise and get the formality of community feedback on this proposal. In closing, next slide, please. I would urgently like to ask the WAPC to act and in an independent fashion and exercise their discretion in supporting the community in the town of Cambridge in its vision and its investment that it's already made in protecting our local trees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of Jessica? Right, thank you. We now move to items 2.15 through to 2.21. There are 7 written deputations, all of them regarding item 3.3, the landfill and solid waste disposal, Alexander Drive, Mirrabooka. I propose now that the meeting is adjourned for a short break following the deputations. Members of the public, in person and online, you're invited to remain in the meeting for the non-confidential items that will be discussed once we reconvene, and that will be in approximately 10 minutes. So thank you. you. Welcome back to the meeting this morning. We're now moving on to the non-confidential items for discussion, decision or noting. And we move to item 3.1, the proposed demolition of the Forestry cottage, Echo Road, Mount Missouri. And we're joined by Aidan O'Brien and David Sands from DPLH. Good morning, gents. Is there anything, Aidan, that you wish to add to the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the report covers off on the issues.
Good, thank you very much. So I'll go to members. Are there any questions, please, of the officers regarding the report? No, thank you. We have a recommendation before us. Do I have a move and a second that we adopt the recommendation, please? Moved by Commissioner Lakey, second by Commissioner Cole. No consent. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Item 3.2 has been withdrawn prior to the meeting. The reason being that the department has received feedback and further information post-agenda finalisation from Main Roads. And in order to ensure that the local structure plan can be implemented in a manner proposed, particularly in relation to the road connections with Auckland Road via a proposed roundabout, further analysis is required before presentation and determination by a future committee meeting. So that then brings us to item 3.3, the landfill and solid waste lot 821 Alexander Drive, Mirrabooka. And we're joined by Jeremy. Thanks, Jeremy.
Good morning.
Good morning. Jeremy, you've listened to the deputations on this particular item. Thank you. Is there anything you wish to add, having heard the deputations, please?
No, I think the deputations covered obviously a lot of items. It's a very complex matter, but I don't believe there's anything we wish to add outside of the report.
Thank you very much. I'll go to members. Are there any questions, please, of Jeremy? Thank you, Commissioner Brooks.
I just wanted to clarify what discussions, if any, regulation over their process, and if so,
Through the chair, the application was referred to DEWA as part of the formal referral process. Advice was provided back from DEWA that identified a number of license applications that have been considered. They also identified what items are considered through the DEWA licenses. So the environmental side of things that is being considered. Clarification was sought later in the process when members of the community raised that DEWA had advised of re-advertising of a proposal, being that it's a split license proposal from the solid waste depot, as well as items associated with asbestos. This isn't associated with the planning application that's in front of us, so we didn't push that any further.
Thank you. Any further? Thank
Chair.
Adair, thank you.
Thank you. It was stated that, well, I asked a question during deputations, and it was pointed out that their landfill on the site has been an ongoing operation. So whilst there was approval that lapsed in 2018, I'm assuming that's for the concrete batching plant, etc. Would you like to comment, or could you please comment on whether the site is an ongoing operation for landfill?
Thank you. Through the chair, our research in dealing with the application identified that the approval for landfill had lapsed at 2018. The application that was considered as in 2012 was a bit unclear in terms of what was included and what wasn't included, but through research into the application, it was identified that the landfill land use was then included as part of the 2012 approval, which lapsed in 2018.
Thank you. Nicole?
Thank you. Jeremy, I did just put forward ahead of the meeting a late question in relation to the requested amendment by Planning Solutions on behalf of the group they're representing. And I was interested in a view on that in terms of adding that asbestos or other hazardous materials are not to be included. And also wording around transported to and sorted as well as disposal. I understand that DUA is dealing with the extended licence issue, but I'm just questioning whether this is actually an intensification of use and that the planning report is really sort of provided on the basis of continuation as is with the processing or bearing of inert and clean fill, particularly when you're getting into sorting of waste and introducing mixed waste in the site, that can be quite significantly different. So I'm just really seeking view on whether there is something to prohibit us from including those words if the SPC is of a view that to continue just with the class 1 waste is what we would like to see.
Through the chair, so answering probably the two parts to that question, the condition was drafted in a way to respond to amenity impacts related to specifically odour. Going through the assessment process, it was identified that a large number of the odour issues would be based on perishable waste, which, whilst not intended, it was considered to be included as part of the condition to confirm what the application was actually seeking. In terms of the second part of the waste depot, including transportation items, it is our understanding that that is kind of the crux of the application, that what's being sought by the applicant. So to condition that there isn't a transportation or sorting of on site, in our opinion, is tantamount to a refusal. So that's we probably not want to include that as part of the condition.
But in terms of the addition of the wording asbestos or other hazardous materials, I'm querying why we would not be able to consider that as part of the application before us.
So in considering the application, we were, and why crucible was included, as mentioned, was relating to amenity impacts, and that's why it was linked through. I don't think there's anything preventing the board from including those items as part of a condition. It was just not something that came through the officer's assessment to be included as a condition.
Just one other.
Yes,
and just in relation to clause 3, we have had raised by Stirling the issue of remediation, and we've heard that that's dealt with through the lease. But I wondered whether there'd be any objection to, or any advice rather, in adding the word this development should be removed, discontinued, and remediated at owner's expense.
I don't see any issue with incorporating a condition that would require the remediation of works upon completion of fill. I think, as mentioned by one of the deputations, this may be in arrears with the lease, which is obviously a separate document, not a planning related matter. So there may be a process associated with that as well. From a planning perspective, I don't think there is an issue including a condition.
So Jeremy, the lease, I believe, is for another 25 years. Is that correct? So if the approval expired in 10 years, obviously there is an option for the applicant to make an application to extend for a further 5, 10, however many years. So essentially, if we were, Commissioner Cole, to introduce remediation, then it would be remediation in the event that the landowner did not achieve a further approval, or words to that effect.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion, please? I'll ask you to consider that as an amendment, if you may wish to move to the recommendation. Thank you, Commissioner Lakey.
Just a quick question in terms of, obviously this needs to be filled at some point to be able to remediate it from its former use. So if there's not inert filling, what are the options to fill it?
As part of the assessment process, we haven't looked at other alternative options to how that kind of proceeds. It's in line with the lease, which is obviously not a planning related document, but I believe a lot of those options and discussions were held through that particular process. As far as the application goes, we've considered what has been put in front of us and considered against the relevant legislative framework. So I don't know if I can answer your question there.
Thank you. Any further questions? We're going to move an amendment, Commissioner Cole.
I will see how this goes. Yes, I'd like to move an amendment to clause 2, so that clause 2 would read condition 2. No putrescible waste, asbestos or other hazardous materials are to be disposed on site.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Knight. Is there any discussion on the amendment, please? Wish to speak to the amendment?
Well, I think this has really caused the greatest concern through the community consultation, and we've heard from both local governments on this matter. I think that Stirling and gave a particularly good deputation outlining some of the issues, and also Mayor Filomena. And I think that if this is going to return to parks and reserve land, it's land owned by the WAPC for that purpose into the future. And I don't think that whilst asbestos might be free fill and might speed up the process, I think ultimately in the long term, this is not in the best interests of the community to have this inner city location used for asbestos fill.
Thank you. Councillor Knight, do you wish to speak? Thank you. I will put the amendment. Is there any dissent, please? No dissent. Thank you. That amendment now forms part of the recommendation. Are there any further amendments, please?
Yes, Chair, just in relation to condition 3, a suggestion I put in, which you expanded upon very nicely, was that to add the wording that after discontinued and remediated, should the application not be extended at the landowner's expense. If I've captured your wording correctly there.
Thank you. Yes. Do I have a seconder for that amendment, please? Seconded by Commissioner Brooks. Is there any discussion? Would you like to speak to the amendment?
No, I think that's been covered.
Thank you. Any discussion on the amendment? Commissioner Brooks, you don't wish to speak. Thank you. I'll put the amendment. Is there any dissent? No, thank you very much. That amendment forms part of the recommendation. Is there any further discussion on the recommendation or the report? Thank you, Commissioner Adair.
Yeah, I have a question. Given that there's 2 approval requests in parallel of this, one with DWER and one with the Commission, is there a risk? What is the risk, I guess, is the question in relation to if the DWER makes a decision that is contrary to what we're discussing today?
So DWER is the decision maker on the licensing matters. We are the decision maker on the land use. Our decision today will be relayed to DWER and hopefully be fed into their deliberations on the licence.
Yeah, so my question is more if DWER were to not approve the licence, there not be some contradiction between the 2 legislations then, because they would have an approval to operate and no licence. Does that matter? Possibly not.
I would suggest it does matter. In my opinion, I can't see that DWER, given the previous history on the site, I can't see that they are not going to allow the disposal of inert material, inert waste. What we are trying to capture is whether or not there's putrescible or asbestos or other hazardous waste being disposed of on land that we own.
Agreed. And if I may, Chair, my point is more that as you correctly said, are dealing with the land use of the site, not the approval of the licensing process, and yet we're digging into the licensing process by being specific about what can and can't go into it. So I'm just curious as to whether we should actually be deferring this item until there is a decision by DWER, which then we can then reinforce or consider in our deliberations, rather than us trying to cross over the line in talking about what kind of waste should be on site or should not be on site.
If we were to defer and wait for the outcome of the DWER decision, then our particular thoughts that have been now embodied within the recommendation would not be relayed to De Work. They may make a decision without being aware of how the Commission feels its own land should be treated.
Respectfully, Chair, I think that there is an opportunity that we could defer and provide advice to De Work.
If you would like to move a procedural motion, we will see whether that gets a seconder.
I'll test the grounds. I would like to move a procedural motion to defer this item until such time as a decision on the licensing has been determined by De Work, and for the department to be instructed to provide advice to De Work of the Commission's or the SPC's concerns in relation to specific land uses or waste material not being included for disposal on site, including, I haven't practiced this word, petrificable and asbestos.
Thank you very much. The procedural motion would be to defer the matter for further consideration. I cannot add all of the other words onto a procedural motion, but the intent has been taken on board by the relevant officers. So with a procedural motion, we take a seconder, there's no further discussion, and the matter, or there will be a vote, but no discussion on it. So is there a seconder for the procedural motion that we defer the matter? Lapses from want of a seconder, thank you. So we come back to the amended recommendation. Is there any further discussion on the recommendation? Brooks?
Just, I think, just in response to Megan's comments, I think there's comments. I think my thinking on it is that if we defer, we could defer, but in doing that, we do risk them proving and it coming back to us with the ACM material being required to be on site. I think if we are putting the amendments that are proposed, then that captures our discomfort and material on site. And send the clear message to De Work, not to be able to make a decision, however, they do make that decision.
I will put the amended recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any dissent? Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3.4, draft Floreat precinct structure plan for consent to advertise. Joined by Mr. Sanderson. Good morning. Dale, you've heard the deputations. Is there anything you wish to add following the deputations?
I think there's the conversation so far has covered a lot of it, but just briefly, importantly, we are not asking or recommending the PSP be assessed at the moment. We have made it very clear to both the proponents and the town that the recommendation that's been put to the SPC today is on the basis of achieving a fair process and nothing to do with the content of the PSP, and that we're reviewing the PSP, its actual content at the back end of the process. So there's no commitment or no implied commitment in relation to the actual content of the PSP, which is, I think, where the core of the concern from the community is coming. But the town have chosen very deliberately not to advertise the PSP as is required by the regs, and it's appropriate that PSP is advertised, and that's the basis for our recommendation.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of Dale? Thank you, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dale. Just probably for the benefit of some of the deputies this morning, there was discussion that that the town had opted not to accept the draft PSP, and if you could just perhaps address that issue in terms of what the deemed provisions say about that.
The deemed provisions require the town to the town has 28 days to accept the PSP or ask for more information. The town's administration did ask for more information. They received more information, and on the 28th day, a report was presented to council with a recommendation to accept the PSP for the purposes of advertising. On that meeting, the meeting was, I can't remember the exact term, but it's effectively adjourned. A decision was not made, so the application was deemed accepted. While council did meet later on to consider the matter, and while any decision they made at that point really doesn't have any legal merit, they did resolve still to not accept the PSP.
Okay, so just to sort of paraphrase, just for simplicity, a local government does not have the power or ability to not accept a draft precinct structure plan for advertising if it satisfied the procedural requirement.
Thank you. Any further questions, please, of Dale? Not, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a move and a second that we adopt the recommendation, please? By Commissioner Adair, seconded by Commissioner Brooks. No dissent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dale. We move to item 3.5. Proposed amendment number 1 to the North Ellenbrook West District Structure Plan for final determination, run by Robert Hodges and Glenn Jim. Robert, we heard a very positive deputation with respect to this particular matter. Is there anything you wish to add to the report?
No, Chairman, I don't think there's anything additional for us to add.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions, please, of Robert? Thank you, Commissioner Cole.
Possibly not a welcome question. It's a bit of a what if question, but I just did wonder if the sand mining did not end up clearing the entirety of it in this area, would there be a requirement to re-look at the way in which that remaining native vegetation was treated within the district structure plan?
Through you, Chair, the information that we have is that it's highly likely that the proponents will seek to utilize the full resource available on the site, given the amount of development happening in the sort of adjoining area. In the event that they did not do so, then the opportunity becomes one of looking at that situation once a local structure plan is prepared for that area, and the extent to which there remains environmental values that should be protected. The local structure plan is the right opportunity for identifying that and protecting those values.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion, please? If not, we have a recommendation before us. Do I have a move and a second that we adopt the recommendation, please? Moved by Commissioner Cole, seconded by Member Franklin. No dissent. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Move to item 3.6, section 31 SAT reconsideration, lots 1401 and 1402 Pipfaretti Road at the local structure plan amendment. I will leave the room and hand over to you. Thank you.
Ryan, welcome to the meeting. Thank you. Do you wish to add anything to the report before the members?
No, thank you.
Okay, members, any questions on this item? We have had a couple of requests put to us.
Through you, Chair. One of the presenters, Ryan, said that by effectively approving this, it changes the designation to a district centre. I wonder if you could comment on that, please. Is that correct?
Certainly, and through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Lakey. I believe that question arose from one of the deputations in relation to the Spires land holding and I guess the broader retail framework. Certainly this issue is explored in the officer's report, so I will just simply supplement a few of those points. I guess the grounding of the decision is based on the city's overriding local planning policy, which is related to the commercial centres. Importantly, this document is to inform the city's draft local planning strategy. In this regard, the strategy does look at a holistic view of the city, and specifically for this centre, it assigns a neighbourhood centre designation
with an expected floor space roughly just under 10,000 square metres by 2041. It does look at a stage gate approach, as the city's officer did indicate, but ultimately it does forecast that it will be a neighbourhood centre, and certainly that allocation is assigned to it.
Good to you. Ryan, a question in relation to the process that's been followed here, and I understand that the original submissions that were put in still stand because this is a reconsideration. However, have been mentioned that there's, well, clearly in the report and what is recommended is that we're looking at basically doing a 180-degree turn and actually going back to what was proposed originally as to the floor space. That's, should there have been, or do you think that the surrounding landowners and the community have had enough notice to have actually been able to comment further on this, or need to comment further? Or do you believe that what they've said originally is sufficient for us to consider?
Through the chair, excellent question. In relation to consultation, certainly this issue has arose through the SAP process, through a review of the modifications to the structure plan. From the officer's perspective, the primary issue before the Commission, as was in June 2021, remains, I guess, the primary issue of retail and trade impacts and that second full-line supermarket. Certainly, we're aware that this is a fairly heated market in terms of the operating centres and land uses. So through the deputation process, we did directly reach out to those operators. However, there is some, I guess, inherent limitations through the SAP process. But noting that the issues before the Commission remain fairly static in terms of the centre impacts, and noting that there has been some fairly significant changes to the planning framework, and I guess that's drawing back to your earlier point of, I guess, revisiting the issue, we feel that there's enough that's changed since 3 years we've been at SAT to look at this on its individual merits, taking into account that new information, and for the reasons expressed in the report, at an officer level perspective, we feel there is merit.
Any other questions? We did have a concern from Jake Spiteri from Rockingham about the 50 Road and Narn Drive intersection. He's very concerned about the traffic signal operating with the roundabout. He's described this as a fatal flaw. I just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Certainly, and responding through the chair. We're not disregarding the comments made by the City of officers. Certainly, we have been through an extensive process where traffic has been a key issue. It's been accumulated in 13 traffic impact assessments. The department has explored this issue very thoroughly. It is mentioned in the report. It's recognised that this intersection is problematic. However, based on the department's review, its performance can be largely accredited to broader regional traffic. On that point, I believe the city's officers made comments back to previous studies and arrangements for the site in relation to the existing structure plan framework. Certainly, with great respect, I'd just like to point out a few points there that this original structure plan was approved in 2015. The supporting TIA was prepared in 2013. There is that reasonable expectation, given planning is not static, that these issues do change over time. We've certainly taken into account the latest information, and we've conducted a very thorough review in relation to that. And I guess just building onto that, to close that out, there is some design solutions available within the existing road reservation of Nan Drive. So it would be expected that at future stages of planning, this issue would be, I guess, further explored, and detailed design would work through. That's, I guess, captured in suggested modifications for an updated TIA. And ultimately, it would boil down to, I guess, a contribution arrangement actually at subdivision or development application stage, and that would need to take into account a need and nexus in informing that.
Thank you. Further questions? We also had a request from the applicant in relation to the timeframe for the second shopping centre supermarket. which is they accept that it's been conditioned or modified to 2032, but they did request an earlier commencement date where a retail assessment report justifies the early commencement. So I just wanted to get your views on that, and if that is acceptable. We have quite a significant list of modifications where that might fit.
Certainly, and through the chair, I guess preliminary comments in relation to that is that certainly the supermarket and the potential for a second supermarket is the key catalyst of change. In relation to that, timing is a very important aspect. I guess ultimately this is a consideration or question for the SPC. However, at officer level, the suggested change is not recommended, given there is considered that there's sufficient scope within the structure plan as proposed to be modified to address planning arrangements. This view takes into account strategic nature and role of a structure plan, and also the information available today, which relates back to the city's local planning policy and the needs impact assessment that accompanies that.
It also appears that there are different views depending on which retail assessment is considered, and it might be problematic to, form a view that's the one view on the timing.
And through the chair, if I can draw back to previous comments about, I guess, where we're at a moment in time. These, I guess, retail analysis ultimately does involve a modelling degree, and as the report indicates, it's an inexact science based on a variability in terms of assumptions and inputs. These are likely to change in the mid to long term. So there appears to be sufficient scope or comfort within the staging mechanism proposed to require an additional or an updated retail needs assessment at that point in time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, are there any amendments before we move and seconder? Okay, could I please have a mover and second item? Councillor Knight. Any dissent? I declare the item adopted. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
So we're now moving to confidential items for discussion. And the Statutory Planning Committee will move into the consideration of those items. And in doing so, I seek a mover and a seconder to resolve pursuant to Regulation 27 of the Planning and Development West Australian Planning Commission Regulations 2024 that the meeting be closed to members of the public as the remaining agenda items raise matters outlined in Regulation 4, subsection 2, and require confidentiality due to the recommendations eventually being submitted to the Minister, or legally and commercially sensitive material being considered, and this will enable free and unfettered debate on strategic policy and governance directions pending their confirmation and formal release. So could I please have a mover and a seconder that we close the meeting to the public? Moved by Councillor Knight, seconded by Commissioner Cole. No dissent. Thank you very much, and thank you to all members of the public.